Russia was only hours away from taking back the skies over Crimea. A convoy stretching for nearly 3 kilometers was already racing toward the peninsula, carrying far more than S-400 launchers. It carried long-range radar systems, command vehicles, electronic warfare units, and everything needed to reconnect an integrated air defense network over Crimea. If that convoy arrived, months of Ukrainian pressure could begin disappearing within days. Future drone and missile strikes would have to fight through a rebuilt wall of radar, instead of exploiting the gaps Kyiv had spent months creating. Ukraine found the convoy before it reached Crimea. At 3:47 a.m. local time, a Ukrainian Leleka-100 reconnaissance drone locked onto the convoy for the first time. At first, it looked like another chance to destroy a Russian convoy. It wasn't. As reconnaissance drones stayed overhead, the full picture slowly emerged. This wasn't simply a convoy delivering reinforcements. It was Russia's only realistic chance to reconnect an integrated air defense network before those gaps could be exploited again. What followed wasn't a race to destroy a convoy. It became a race against time to stop the only opportunity Russia had to rebuild the shield protecting Crimea. The reconnaissance drone stayed overhead, tracking the convoy as it continued toward Crimea. The column stretched for nearly 3 kilometers. Even before individual vehicles could be identified, one fact stood out. It was far too large to be a routine logistics movement. The operator had only seconds to confirm what he was seeing. Then, another contact appeared. A Russian Orlan reconnaissance drone entered the area from the east. Moments later, R-330ZH ZTEL electronic warfare crews began sweeping the spectrum, searching for any transmission that could reveal the drone's position. The video feed flickered. Telemetry became unstable. For several seconds, the convoy disappeared beneath a tree line as the weakened control link struggled to hold. No one inside the command post knew whether the reconnaissance team had lost the target, or whether the target had simply vanished. If the convoy slipped away now, there would be no second chance before it reached Crimea. The hunt had changed. The Ukrainian reconnaissance team had found the convoy. Now the convoy was hunting them. The operators immediately reduced every transmission to just a few seconds before climbing above the interference long enough to reacquire the column. The image returned. This time, it was sharper. Large 8-axle transporter vehicles, towering radar trailers rising above the rest of the convoy. Heavy escort vehicles holding unusually disciplined spacing. This wasn't an ordinary logistics column. Before breaking away, the drone captured its first clear imagery of the convoy's heaviest vehicles and transmitted the data back to the command post. The room remained silent. Everyone understood what staying overhead meant. Every additional transmission increased the risk of being found. The order finally came. Stay with it. The reconnaissance mission was over. Something much larger had just begun. Minutes later, the first detailed vehicle identifications began reaching the intelligence analysts. What they discovered next would completely change the mission. The first vehicle identifications reached the intelligence analysts less than 10 minutes later. The first image looked familiar. An S-400 launcher, nothing unusual. Then another image arrived. A 91N6E, Big Bird long-range surveillance radar. Seconds later came the 92N6 Gravestone fire control radar. Then, another transmission appeared. Tor M2 air defense vehicles, Panzer S-1 defense systems, electronic warfare units, command vehicles, reload trucks. The room fell silent. By the time the final image appeared, no one was looking at individual vehicles anymore. The conclusion was unavoidable. They were looking at Crimea's next air defense network moving down a highway. If this convoy reached the peninsula, months of Ukrainian pressure could begin disappearing within days. The command post abandoned its original strike plan immediately. The convoy was already less than 4 hours from Crimea. The race had already begun. Weeks of Ukrainian long-range drone strikes had already broken important links inside Crimea's air defense network. This convoy existed for one reason: to reconnect them. Russian crews wouldn't just be replacing damaged equipment. They would be rebuilding an integrated defensive system by reconnecting long-range radars, engagement radars, launchers, electronic warfare units, and command vehicles. That would make every future drone and missile strike far more difficult. The planners issued a new priority. Forget the convoy. Find the critical vehicles. Every kilometer it traveled brought Crimea one step closer to rebuilding its shield. The question was no longer what Russia was moving. It was whether there was still enough time to stop it. The new intelligence picture demanded an immediate response. At 6:18 a.m., the first interception plan was finally ready. Within seconds, the launch order was passed to the waiting FPV crews. Reconnaissance drones remained overhead, updating the convoy's speed and direction in real time. Several kilometers ahead, the crews connected batteries, checked video feeds, loaded their drones into launch tubes, and moved into concealed firing positions. On paper, the timing looked almost perfect. Then, everything changed. Thermal imagery showed the lead Tor M2 leaving the convoy and moving into a firing position. Seconds later, Panzer S-1 crews expanded their defensive perimeter along both sides of the column. Almost immediately, electronic warfare operators flooded the spectrum with powerful jamming signals. Drone video feeds began breaking apart. Navigation signals drifted. The convoy wasn't simply moving anymore. It was transforming into a moving fortress. The final launch authorization flashed across the command screen. Every operator looked at it. No one touched it. Each passing second pushed the convoy closer to Crimea. Launching now would send the entire FPV strike package into overlapping layers of missiles, cannon fire, and electronic warfare. The first wave would likely be destroyed before reaching the convoy. The second might never even find it. 5 long seconds passed. Then the commander made his decision. Cancel the strike. The FPV team stood down. The reconnaissance drones remained overhead. Ukraine had given up its best opportunity. Or so it seemed. Far below, the convoy continued south without slowing down. Russian escort crews gradually relaxed, believing their defensive posture had already prevented the attack. They had no idea Ukraine had stopped chasing the convoy. It had started hunting the operation behind it. Every kilometer the convoy traveled brought Crimea one step closer to restoring its air defense network. But it also carried Ukraine one step closer to finding a better opportunity. The convoy never stopped. After the canceled strike, Russian commanders pushed the column to maintain its schedule toward Crimea. Speed had become just as important as protection, but maintaining both at the same time came with a cost. To keep the convoy moving at highway speed, escort commanders gradually widened the spacing between several defensive vehicles as the road curved south. Dust rolled behind the heavy transporters, while radar trailers shifted lanes without slowing. High above, the reconnaissance drone watched every adjustment. The first change looked routine. A Panzer S-1 vehicle moved farther forward to protect the lead elements. Seconds later, a Tor M2 shifted left to cover the convoy's exposed flank. Radar vehicles adjusted toward the expected direction of attack. Meanwhile, the electronic warfare group concentrated its jamming around the rear command vehicles. Each adjustment made perfect tactical sense. Together, they changed the geometry of the convoy. The analysts replayed the latest drone footage frame by frame. At first, nothing appeared unusual. The footage rolled again, then again. One analyst suddenly stopped the replay. A narrow corridor had opened along the convoy's right flank. For the first time since the operation began, no single defensive layer could fully cover that approach. The command post immediately checked the convoy's speed, road geometry, and the positions of the FPV launch teams already waiting ahead. The calculations finished within seconds. For the first time that morning, the numbers worked. The opening would remain exposed for less than 5 minutes. Miss it, and the formation would close again. There would not be another opportunity before the convoy reached Crimea. Russia hadn't intended to create the opening. It had appeared because the convoy chose speed over perfect defensive coverage. Now only one question remained. Could the drones reach it before the window disappeared? The countdown had already begun. At 7:12 a.m., less than 5 minutes remained before the defensive gap closed. The first FPV drones lifted off from concealed launch positions several kilometers ahead of the convoy. Above them, the reconnaissance drone continued updating the convoy's speed and formation in real time. The first kilometers were uneventful. Then, they reached the electronic warfare barrier. Video feeds flickered. Control links weakened. For several seconds, the lead drone's camera dissolved into digital noise. When the picture finally returned, the drone was only a few meters above the ground, racing across open fields with grass filling most of the screen. The opening was still there. The attack continued. Ahead, the convoy reacted. Escort vehicles shifted once again. Air defense crews scanned the sky. The defensive network was tightening around a threat it still couldn't see. Every adjustment narrowed the opening. Every passing second shortened the attack window. Then another warning appeared. The lead drone's video froze. No one spoke. 1 second. 3. 5. The screen never came back. No one knew whether electronic warfare, defensive fire, or mechanical failure had ended its mission. There wasn't time to investigate. Only one strike drone remained. Its battery indicator continued falling. 22%. 21. 20. The command post watched the numbers in silence. Abort the mission, or continue toward the only opening Russia had accidentally created. The remaining battery might not be enough for a second attempt. The commander's answer came quietly. Continue. The surviving drone pressed forward. The gap ahead was already beginning to close. There would be only one attack, only one target. From that moment on, every remaining second mattered. The next decision would determine whether Crimea's shield survived or disappeared before it could be rebuilt. The surviving drone finally reached the opening. Less than 2 minutes remained before the convoy restored its defensive formation. On the operator's screen, the lead S-400 launcher came into view. The targeting reticle settled over it. The operator held the crosshair steady. Everything was ready. Only the release command remained. For weeks, those launchers had symbolized Russia's air defense shield over Crimea. Then, the reconnaissance feed updated one final time. The command vehicle had shifted position. Behind it, the 9-2N6 Gravestone fire control radar was entering the opening first. Everything changed. Destroying the launcher would remove one missile battery. The radar was different. Without it, the launchers could no longer fight as one. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The launcher was already locked. The opening was already closing. The commander made his decision. New target. The drone broke away from the launcher and accelerated toward the radar vehicle before the defensive corridor disappeared. Seconds later, the reconnaissance feed filled with smoke and dust. When the picture cleared, the launcher was still moving. But the rotating radar antenna had vanished. The operational display inside the command post refreshed. One radar track disappeared. Moments later, another linked track vanished with it. Russian escort crews immediately shifted their attention to protecting the surviving launchers. From the road, it looked as if the convoy had survived the attack. The launchers were still advancing toward Crimea. For several moments, Russia appeared to have won. But inside the command post, no one was watching the launchers anymore. They were watching an integrated air defense network begin to come apart. For the first time since the operation began, both sides believed they had won. Only one of them was right. From the road, the operation looked like a success. The surviving S-400 launchers continued toward Crimea without slowing. A BREM recovery vehicle pushed past the destroyed radar, dragging twisted wreckage off the highway. Escort vehicles spread back into marching formation. Radio traffic became calmer. The convoy accelerated once again. To the Russian crews, the attack was over. The launchers had survived. The mission would continue. For several minutes, it looked as though they were right. High above, the reconnaissance drone kept watching. Inside the command post, the analysts waited for the surviving launchers to reconnect with the network. Nothing appeared. They waited again. Still nothing. No new command link. No synchronized radar picture. No shared target tracks. The operational picture had changed. The launchers were still moving, but they were no longer operating as a single air defense system. Crimea would still receive the launchers. It would not receive the shield. One critical vehicle, however, was still holding the convoy together. The command vehicle. It was coordinating recovery crews, rerouting escorts, and trying to restore control across the column. The command post faced one final decision: commit the last FPV drone, or let the convoy escape. There would be only one chance. The commander gave the order. Minutes later, another explosion echoed across the highway. The BREM stopped halfway through the recovery operation. The command vehicle never moved again. One launcher halted where it was. Another continued south without waiting. For the first time that morning, the convoy no longer looked like a convoy. It looked like isolated vehicles trying to reach the same destination. No one inside the command post spoke. The operational display remained unchanged. The network would not recover. The surviving launchers continued toward Crimea alone. No radar followed them. No command vehicle directed them. The launchers would still arrive. The shield never would. Days later, the surviving S-400 launchers rolled into new positions across Crimea. From a distance, the mission looked complete, but something never arrived with them. The shield they were meant to restore. Russia didn't fail because it lost a few launchers. It failed because the integrated air defense network those vehicles were meant to rebuild never came back together. The radar was gone. The command link was gone. The only opportunity to reconnect the entire system had already passed. Crimea was still defended, but its air defense network never returned to the level Moscow had planned. Russian commanders were forced to spend the following weeks rebuilding coordination while continuing to operate with a less effective defensive network. Ukraine never needed to destroy the entire convoy. It only needed to destroy the right moment, the right connection, and the only opportunity to bring an entire air defense network back to life. The surviving launchers reached Crimea. The shield never did. Modern warfare is no longer decided by who destroys the most equipment. It is decided by who prevents an entire military system from ever becoming whole again. If today's battlefield proved anything, it's that destroying a weapon can win a battle, but denying an enemy the chance to rebuild an entire system can shape the course of a campaign. If you enjoyed this strategic breakdown, subscribe and join us for the next operation. And let us know in the comments. In modern warfare, what matters more, destroying the most weapons or preventing an entire military system from ever becoming whole again?